Hello there, thrill seekers! One time, my teacher, Gudo Wafu Nishijima Roshi, said to me, "A Buddhist Sangha can never be a democracy." And that was a bit of a surprise to hear. I don't know, maybe it wasn't quite a surprise, but it might be the kind of thing that would shock a lot of people who are involved in American Zen. So I'd like to see if I can talk about that. We'll see how far we get. Nishijima Roshi said that a Buddhist Sangha couldn't be a democracy in the context of, I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was something going on within his group, Dogen Sangha, which was in Tokyo, or not in Tokyo, it was in Motoyawata, it was near Yokohama. Anyway, it doesn't matter where it was. But it was his group in Japan. And it was mostly composed of foreign people, non-Japanese people, and something had come up. I don't know what the controversy was, but something had come up where the group, where the majority of the group wanted to do something, and Nishijima Roshi did not think that was the right thing to do. I wish I could remember what it was, but I can't. And he said, a Buddhist Sangha can never be a democracy. And from that point on, whatever he said, whatever decision he'd made about whatever the thing was, that was it. That was how that stood, and he didn't care if all of us left. If we'd all walked out because of this decision, I don't think it would have fazed him. It might have fazed him, but he wouldn't have changed his mind. He would have just carried on as he was. But what does this mean, a Buddhist Sangha can never be a democracy? Because most Buddhist Sanghas, most Zen centers, that kind of concept that exists in America and in Europe these days, most of them are basically democratically run. The San Francisco Zen Center, for example, as far as I know, they have like 3 abbots, and they decide every important decision by committee, and this is how it goes. And if you read their version of Shobo Genzo, the one credited to Kazuaki Tanahashi, I can't say this for sure, but to me it reads like a book that was created, a translation at least, that was created by a committee of people who had to agree on everything that came out in that book. That's what it feels like to me. And I know that that's how they make all their decisions. I think Nishijima Roshi's idea of a Buddhist Sangha was more like my idea of a Buddhist Sangha, or maybe I got my idea from him, or I don't know. But let me tell you how I think of it, and we'll see how it goes. To me, learning Buddhism is like an apprenticeship. So let me tell you about the non-Buddhist apprenticeship I had before I ever got into Buddhism and how that worked. So back in Wadsworth, Ohio, back when I went to high school, there was another guy, same class in high school as me, and his name was Dave Chamberlain. And Dave was an amazing guitar player, really gifted guy, really could play guitar. He was a guy who bought the first Van Halen album and figured out how Eddie Van Halen was doing that thing on the song Eruption by listening to it. There were no YouTube tutorials in those days. We didn't even have MTV in Wadsworth because the guy who was like some comptroller of the city or something refused to allow any of the cable companies to come into Wadsworth. So we didn't even have MTV until after I graduated high school. We didn't have cable TV there. So he, as far as I know, hadn't seen Van Halen in concert. He figured out by ear. I'm talking about the part where Eddie goes like this. I don't know if you could hear that. I don't have an amplifier out here, but that's the thing, that two-handed tapping thing. Nobody knew how to do that in those days, but Dave figured it out just by listening to it. That's how good this guy was. He could figure out anything. And I was just starting out playing guitar, and I wanted to learn how to play guitar. And at one point, I kind of asked Dave if he would teach me something. There was some song I wanted to know, and he didn't even say no. I mean, he didn't say yes, and he instead of saying no, he just gave me a look like yeah, I'm not going to waste my time on doing that. So I figured out the only way I was going to learn how to play guitar from Dave would be to watch him as often as possible. And lucky for me, he had a band that played around town a lot, or around various places, bars and things. He was playing in bars when he was like 16 years old, maybe 15 years old, lying about his age and stuff. And so what I did is I wormed my way into Dave's social circle, and I offered to carry amplifiers upstairs and run the lights. They had this little light system of four colors of lights, and you could run the lights during the songs, and I learned to do that. And all of this was just solely for the purpose, as far as I was concerned, that I would be able to stand up in front when they played and watch what Dave did. And I learned a bunch of things. I learned how to do that two-handed tapping from watching Dave. I learned a lot of songs. The songs that Dave's band played were not my favorite songs. They were playing bars, and they were basically playing what these days is called classic rock, but in those days was just rock. It was the mainstream stuff that you heard on the radio, with a bit more sort of heavy metal stuff thrown in than you would ordinarily hear on the radio. So I liked the heavy metal stuff they played. When they played like Highway Star by Deep Purple, I really dug that, and some of the Van Halen songs they played, but most of the other stuff was like top 40 crap. I was really into new wave and punk rock. But Dave was the best guitar player around, and I just learned a ton of stuff from him. Also, little trivia for you: Dave Chamberlain's brother was and is Steve Chamberlain. Steve Chamberlain later moved to Hollywood, changed his name to Stephen Sweet, and ended up being the drummer in the band Warrant. Dave himself runs a studio here in LA, and he does pretty well for himself, but he never, as far as I know, kind of hit the big time as a guitar player, even though he's still a tremendous guitarist. I saw him a few years ago, and he's still way a million years beyond me. But that's how I learned it. Now, I couldn't demand anything of Dave. There was nothing I could tell him. Like, I couldn't ask him what songs to play. I couldn't ask him to slow down for a minute. I remember once when I was trying to learn the beginning of Spirit of the Radio by Rush, because it was a neat little guitar player. I asked him, could you play that slow? Again, just disdainful look, and that was all I got. So I had to just watch him, and I can't do it anymore, but I eventually figured out how to play the beginning of Spirit of the Radio, at least the Dave Chamberlain version. Turns out everybody plays that a little bit differently. Anyhow, that's how I learned. So there was no question of asking anything of him, of demanding anything of him. All I could do was not get in his way, not be such a pain in the ass that he would kick me out and not let me carry the amplifiers and stuff for him. So I had to be on my best behavior in order to be allowed to continue doing this, and I had to sort of pay my dues by doing jobs for him. That's how an apprenticeship works. In the classic Zen tradition, we can look to Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was the guy who supposedly brought the Zen tradition into China, and what he did, as far as this is my reading of the story, is he went to China, and the old question is, what was Bodhidharma's intention of going to China? Because we don't really know what his intention was. He went there, and he sat in a cave and meditated for 9 years, and anybody who would come along to try to see what he was doing, he would chase them away. But eventually, 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman, got into his good graces, made it clear to him that they weren't going to disturb him or make his life a living hell, and maybe they did stuff for him in order to be allowed to sit in Bodhidharma's cave and learn the Zen way from him. But there was no question of demanding anything. There was no question of democracy, of a bunch of people getting together and deciding how to do things. It was just, you were in there and Bodhidharma was sitting, and if you wanted to sit with Bodhidharma, you had to be on your best behavior and just sit there. And if he deigned to tell you something or instruct you on any philosophical point, you were lucky. That's how it worked traditionally. Now, fast forward 2,000 some years or whatever, I don't know exactly when Bodhidharma lived, maybe 1,500 years ago, long time ago. Anyway, I was running a little group in Santa Monica, California, and there came a time when I was having some trouble with the group, where they were making a lot of demands on me. And I didn't like it, and I couldn't really even meet their demands, let alone, whatever they wanted me to do was just not going to happen. So at the time, I went to go see Mel Weitzman, who was the late Mel Weitzman, who passed away, I think, last year, who was the head of the Berkeley Zen Center, and they were having a sesshin there, a 7-day retreat sort of thing, and I signed up for it, mostly for the opportunity to talk to Mel Weitzman. I wanted to talk to him about my problems that I was having with the group. And so I got a chance to do dokusan, which is a one-on-one conversation you have with the teacher of a retreat. And I explained to Mel what was going on with my group and, all the difficulties I was having and blah, 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 and just poured it all out. And after I was done, Mel said to me, "What is your bottom line with your group?" And I never thought about what is my bottom line with the group, but I said right there spontaneously, "Well, I sit Zazen every day, and on Saturdays I open the door and people can come and join me." And even though Mel didn't say anything to me, he brought what I had to say out of me in a way that I wasn't able to do it by myself. So I give him a lot of credit for this insight. But that's my bottom line. That's how it works for me. And so it's an apprenticeship. So in an apprenticeship, you go and see the person who is doing the thing they do. And if you're on your best behavior when they're doing it, then you get to learn from it. You don't get to choose what you're going to learn, and you don't get to choose the pace it goes at, and you don't get to tell the person you're apprenticing with how to do their job, or what the parameters are or what the rules are. None of that. You don't get any opportunity for that. You're just the apprentice and learning from the master, the master and apprentice. I mean, that's what they call it in that tradition too. And that is, to me, the only way that Zen teaching can function. And I'm not trying to say that American and European Zen centers where things are done democratically are bad places, or are trying to disparage them in any way. But once you set up that kind of a democratic structure where it's almost like a business transaction, where the people who come to the center tend to think of themselves as customers, who can demand things of the person that they're paying for the service what to do. And that just kills it. That just kills it completely once the customer can demand of the teacher what to do. So, as far as those democratically run centers go, sometimes Zen teaching can occur within that structure, but only when the people involved get rid of the mindset that they're that the student is the customer and the teacher is the salesperson or something like that. It has to be like an apprenticeship relationship, and that can sometimes exist, but I think it's really, really difficult to make that happen in any kind of democratic sort of Zen center like we have in most of America and Europe these days. Difficult, not impossible. I think it can be done, but it's difficult to establish the proper relationship. So I guess if there's any sort of advice I want to give to you, the listener out there, as part of this video, is to, if you find yourself in an institution like that, try to put yourself in the mindset of being an apprentice to the person who is doing what they're doing anyway. So what this person is doing anyway is the practice of Zazen and the study of Buddhism, both philosophically, as in reading it from books, and in a practical way of trying to live the philosophy. That's how I treated Nishijima Roshi. That's how I treated Tim. In both cases, neither of them had an institution that they were trying to keep up, so that was good. Nishijima Roshi happened to be supported by the people that he had worked for, who were very enamored with Zen and were happy to help him out financially without asking any questions. Tim just, he did everything completely on his own. He just had his little sitting group in his house, and that worked out well because it was his house and we were guests in his house, and there wasn't much we could say about how things were run. He was in charge there. And I guess I was really lucky to find those kind of situations. Those kind of situations are very rare these days, and most Zen centers, especially big ones like San Francisco Zen Center or whatever Zen center you have, they need to be supported by donors, and there has to be a kind of system in place to get butts in seats, and if you don't have enough people coming, then the financial support goes away and you can't have it anymore. It's very difficult. This is why the bigger the center is, the more difficult it is for real Zen to happen there. God, I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble for saying all this. So, you know what? I'm going to stop right there and just let that sit and hope that I don't get slammed in the comments section. If you want to contribute to me being able to Zen it out every day, you can go to the URL you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my only way of making a living, so I'm supported by you folks. But I'm supported by you folks to be a kind of entertainer on the internet, which I really appreciate, but that's the way I look at this part of what I do. It's not exactly the same thing as Zen teaching, which, as far as I'm concerned, has to be done face-to-face, although you can learn a lot about Zen from this channel, I think, so I want to keep that up, but I think it's a different sort of thing. Anyway, if you want to donate to that, you can. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't have to donate if you don't want to donate. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye, Zones. Ziggy, what do you think of the guitar? Ziggy, what do you think of the guitar? You want to play guitar? You want to smell the guitar? You don't like guitars? Or you don't like Stratocasters? Here, smell the guitar. Come on.